Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we bring our 2019 season to an end with the holiday-themed Dutch film Saint or Sint. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, editor of the summer's Castle of Horror anthology, the upcoming Young Captain Nemo, Quest for the Nautilus, and currently the Castle of Horror anthology Holiday Horrors. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin, writer of the long-running underground comic series Halloween Man and Austin Chronicle, Best of Austin Award winner, Mr. Drew Edwards. Say hello.
Ho, 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 ho.
Oh, I'm not even sure if Sinterklaas actually says ho 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 in this.
No, he doesn't.
And finally, also in Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Hola.
Hola. Okay, Sint, released on DVD as Saint in Europe and Saint Nick sometimes in the United States. I saw it on Amazon Prime as Saint, is a 2010 Dutch dark comedy horror film about Sinterklaas, the character on which the Anglo-Saxon Santa Claus is based would be the wrong word, is similar. The film was directed by Dick Moss. He had already made his mark in the horror genre with De Lift. The story distorts popular traditions of Sinterklaas, portrays him as a ghost murdering lich bishop who comes around when there's a full moon on the night of Sinterklaas Day and murders all kinds of people. And that's it in a nutshell. So
the eve of Sinterklaas Day, the night before.
Right.
Yeah.
On December 5th, when there's a full moon on December 5th, Saint Nicholas comes back in his boat from Spain, and we should recap the basic idea of Sinterklaas when we get into it. But first, let's get our opening thoughts. We'll go Julia, Drew, Tony, and then I'll go Julia. What did you think of this movie?
I expected to really not like this film, and I was pleasantly surprised. There was, it was gory, which I never like, but it was kind of comically gory. It was like it's only a flesh wound, Monty Python style gory. But the rest of the film, I thought there was some really interesting and creative bits. There were some really neat transitions. Some of the effects were really hokey, but some of them were pretty cool. Like the horse galloping on the rooftops. Sometimes it looked like a computer game. Sometimes it looked pretty neat, like especially when it was the actual footage of a horse on a treadmill, which apparently is a thing that they had. And they just, I guess, however they CG'd it onto the roofs, whatever. But anyway, there were some really neat things. And even the gore there were some really clever bits where I was just like, okay, I did not see that coming at all. So, it's not, I didn't think it was scary. I thought it was, unintentionally funny in a couple of parts, but I did think it was pretty interesting in a lot of, and I wish we would have seen it in, with the original language and subtitled. We didn't find that. We don't have Hulu, so we saw a dubbed one, which unfortunately the voice acting was just awful. But I could tell that the movie was better than the voice acting was.
Super strange. Yeah, we'll comment on that a little bit more later. Drew, what are your thoughts?
Well, first full confession, I'm the one that brought this movie to the podcast. I was the one that suggested it, because this has become kind of a holiday season tradition of me. And in fact, I actually watched this on Sinterklaas Eve this year. But I always watch it sometime in December. Last year, I watched it or around, like after actually Christmas. I watched it on New Year's. But I really enjoy this movie, even though, first of all, some super problematic stuff about it by American standards, and I have to say that going into it, and we'll probably talk more about that once we get into it. But I am fascinated by this movie, outside the fact that I just think it's got kind of a cool atmosphere with like Amsterdam and being covered in snow, and there's this sort of winter spookiness to it that I wish more horror films had. But also, I'm fascinated about other cultures' takes on popular holidays, and in this case, how this relates to our conception of Christmas and Santa Claus and everything. And I really like Christmas-based horror movies, but I definitely prefer ones more like this and like Rare Exports and Krampus, where it is a supernatural, folkloric thing instead of just like a serial killer in a Santa Claus costume. That to me is kind of boring. Like, I like this genre of Christmas movie where there's something supernatural about it and there's this sort of folklore quality to it. And this has that in spades, in part because it is a European film, and it's extremely weird and audacious. Like I don't think that a movie like this could come from America. It is very over the top, as Julia already pointed out, and it's just like really nasty and in your face in the way it just wants to turn all the conventions of Sinterklaas on its head. I also, as an aside, before we get to the next opening thoughts, I've actually been fortunate enough to go to a Sinterklaas Eve festival in my wife's hometown in Kingston, because there's a lot of Dutch settlers there. So every year they do actually have a Sinterklaas festival with like the steamship and everything. So I got to kind of see a smaller version of what they're trying to celebrate in this movie. So like the first time I saw this movie, this was extremely fascinating to me, having seen some of this stuff up close. So I have a lot of affection for this movie, even though I'm gonna say it's far from perfect, but its audaciousness just gives it this really deep charm.
That's wonderful. Wow. Thank you very much for that. Tony, what are your thoughts?
I liked it all right. I think I was curious what Julia was going to think. There's a lot of really over the top gore. I think what I like most about it is that it definitely has decided, the filmmakers have decided, we're going to take what we dug about 80s style slashery movies with lots of gore and sex and that kind of stuff. But since it's European, there's not even the kind of puritanical prudishness,
right?
But they've kind of set that, hey, kids are going to have sex and there's going to be that kind of thing, but there's also going to be a bunch of people running around being teenagers. So I feel like they really watched a lot of like Friday the 13th, Nightmare, and even a lot of the knockoffs that went even gorier and stranger.
Sure.
But since its stories are so alien to most of the viewership, I think, over here in the States, it does kind of make it a little bit more special. It's a little bit, it's weird because it's so over the top. I wouldn't use the word campy, but a lot of kind of extreme dark humor.
Yes.
But it's also really nihilistic in a lot of ways. And I find that fascinating. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you look at and go, wow, that is such a different thing than we have in the US, which may turn some people off. But I think it's got something for gore hounds. It's got something for people in the 80s who dig 80s horror, with kind of a new veneer. And when they do really cool practical effects, those look great. I still hate CG blood though, and there's enough of that I'm not a big fan of. But I mean, I guess you got to do it for your budget. I just wish that it was better than it is.
Sure.
But yeah, I enjoyed it. I preferred Rare Exports and a couple of other movies like that, but I thought it was decent. It has a lot of just weird, crazy bits that you kind of do want to show your friends and go, check this out. How crazy is this part? It even goes full, like almost Hong Kong movie insanity in a couple parts.
Yes.
Which I'm down with. Anybody who's listened to this at all knows that.
One of my thoughts was that this was extremely similar, as you mentioned, to like Rare Exports. And one thing that both of those movies have in common is that they both take ideas that are kind of crazy and over the top and do have a lot of humor. And I have been the first guy who has complained that I often don't like horror that gets mixed over much with humor, but I do make exceptions. And I feel like this movie is funny, but the reason why I feel like I'm comfortable with the humor in this movie is that it's funny, but there are no gags. What there is a lot of like clever dialogue and situations where it doesn't feel goofy. I actually don't. You know what? I'm saying this and I'm having a hard time even coming up with a way of saying it that
I
makes
mean,
sense when you're like, well, Jason, you didn't like, I didn't like Evil Dead. And the reason I didn't like Evil Dead was because of the Roadrunner style humor going on all the time.
it's
And
weird that you say that to me because the gags are the gore in this.
that's
To me,
true.
they're not dissimilar.
Yeah,
Like maybe the
they
acting,
are.
but maybe there isn't as much over. Like there's a lot of hammy. I mean, Raimi and company, Campbell, everybody in it is trying to do an almost Three Stooges-y kind of thing because that's always what they like to do
That's
in
right.
Evil Dead. So maybe that's what, because they don't do that, but there's still a lot of gag humor.
Oh yeah,
There's even the stuff with the
like
horse later
when he
on.
winds up with arms trailing behind his car, and that's why the police think
Right.
that he's been involved. There is, and I'm just saying that whatever that dividing line is, I found myself enjoying where this movie fell on the side of that line. I think that Rare Exports had more sort of sweet charm about it. I remember the kid
Oh,
gets
absolutely.
up in the morning and he goes outside and he's on a farm, and he goes outside like to use the bathroom, and he just seems so cold. And
Well,
there's none of that here. This
Rare
is
Exports is more like horror Goonies,
yes,
whereas
yeah, yeah,
this is
yeah,
more horror 80s.
yes,
Again, it's
Combined a
closer to
little bit with Pirates of the Caribbean because you've got that whole
right,
Black Pearl thing.
that's
right,
true.
but it's
Yeah,
closer to any kind of movie at camp. Only it happens in a city.
yeah, absolutely. So, in fact, let's talk about the legend of Sinterklaas as presented here, and also, and also what this has to do with any real legend. I don't know anything about the actual Sinterklaas of the Netherlands, but as presented here, Saint Nicholas was an evil ass bishop back in the 15th century and slaughtered a bunch of people and died by fire. And now, even though everybody celebrates Sinterklaas Day, when
And
everything
you should
lines
point
up
out
just
that
right.
the movie opens with that. It's not
Yes,
just we're not just told that. We actually see
right. We see
him
the
getting set
flashback,
on fire. Yeah.
and then he comes
Well,
back.
it's
Yeah, go ahead.
there's the actual story that we see, and then there's the story the Catholic Church came up with to kind of cover this up, because there's a whole conspiracy to
Yes,
cover up that
Right.
there is that although this happened, and that there's this being
Within
that
the movie. Yeah.
murders people. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, right. So you open with the scene of him being this horrible person and the villagers setting him on fire, and then but he comes back as a ghost a bunch of years later and kills how many years is it? Like it's
whenever there's a full moon.
whenever December 5th falls on a full moon. Yeah,
Yes,
he comes back and he kills the crap out of everybody, but we find out when he comes back in 1940.
68,
No, the first 68 is when it is. Okay, yeah, right.
68 is
So
the
when he comes
first
back
one.
in
Yeah.
68, that's when we hear what Drew's saying, that the Catholic Church has made him out to be this wonderful,
Yes.
the Saint Nick that we kind of know as
And,
basically
and we
where
see the
he
kids
brings
performing their
gifts
sort
and
of Dutch ritual, which is they leave the shoes with a snack
carrots for the
for
horse
the
and
horses,
hay. Yeah.
and they're singing their little song, and then the evil lich Sinterklaas with his Black Pete demon pirates come in and slaughter everybody.
Well, and
And
they come like on a Black Pearl ship, which is really interesting.
yes, and so this is what we're also given, is that Santa in this tradition comes to the Netherlands from Spain. I don't know why, and brings with him his helper Zwarte Piet, who is a small,
Well,
dark-skinned.
he's a Moor.
He's a Moor, and he's wearing
Yeah.
all this traditional clothing, and And so that's the bit of tradition that we actually get to see, because a couple of the teenagers are gonna go do their Santa Claus bit, hand out presents and have people sit on their laps and stuff at a girls' sorority, and because they are teenage horn dogs, this sounds awesome, and it is awesome. They're gonna do Santa Claus, and two of them are dressed up like what we would call elves, but for them is Zwarte Piet, and that
Yeah,
involves
except
full on blackface.
it's also okay.
Which is incredibly shocking to Americans, especially considering the fact this is a relatively recent movie. This is from within
Right.
this movie was made this decade.
Tony,
Yeah.
what
So
were,
that
what were you going to say?
they've come around to saying, okay, it's not really blackface, it's that it's soot, because he comes in through the chimney. So whenever you see that, it's actually soot. So they've actually adjusted the makeups now so that it'll be more streaky, so it looks like soot, because they
Yeah,
haven't
but
wanted
this
to
movie-
abandon the
that's
makeup.
better.
But in this
I'm just telling you
movie,
that's what
it's
they've done.
full on. In this movie, it's
Yes.
full on. Yeah, we're gonna look like this character,
Right.
but they're all white dudes.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
is
The idea is that
Oof.
they're no longer. It's not about skin color. It's about dirt.
These are the moments when I really wish that we had at least one person of color. Well, Juliet, you're a person of color, but I wish we had
Ish.
at least another person of color who could tell us, like, is it okay if the Dutch do blackface? Does it
I
like
think-
like I mean, I have no idea. I don't know how to treat any of this. To be honest.
Again, this is coming from me, so I think you're totally correct.
Yeah.
But my take is, now as we progress, like, yes, it is a fictional character, but I think anytime somebody's deciding blackface, what could go wrong? Maybe not. Just
All I
Looking
all
at
I
you,
know,
I think
Joe.
I don't think we have to do. I don't think that's a thing. I don't know. I'm not the arbiter of that, but it really does feel like maybe some traditions we leave behind.
Can die. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
probably where now that we're a global
all I
community.
know,
basically.
all I
Yeah.
know is when I saw this in New York, Pete did not look like that. There was nobody in the United States, like no matter how it flies in Amsterdam, in the United States of America, you did not, even people doing Sinterklaas here who are
Yeah.
of Dutch descent, they had the sense to not do that. I don't think it's okay, but I am also not of the culture that is being represented in this movie. So maybe somebody is going to come online and slap me around about that, and I'm prepared to do that. But it is incredibly shocking. Like, the first time I saw this movie and that happened, I was like, "The fuck?" Like this is a thing that still happens, and I guess that was like 2014 when I saw this, maybe.
Yeah.
And
2010 is
like,
when it's from.
Yeah. So it's only 9 years
well,
old.
but
Yeah.
So like, but when I saw this for the first time, I saw it on Netflix at a friend's house.
Yeah.
So like when I remember seeing that and being incredibly like, and that is like really kind of the 400-pound Santa Claus in the room if you're asking somebody to watch this movie with you, because like if you don't tell them, they're going to be shocked, but if you do tell them, they might not otherwise watch the movie. So like I think you're kind of in a weird place. So I think you just kind of have to let people watch it and make up their own mind about it. But it does those scenes are deeply uncomfortable while you're watching them.
It is. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Tony.
I also think this is neither here. This isn't an indictment, nor I still think just don't do it. But also in the movie, it's some really bro-ham teenagers.
Yes.
Who are going along with this in 2010. And that is by no means an excuse. But when you look at it, in the same way that you'll see frat boys doing the same thing, I was shocked that, wow, okay, people do that.
Yeah.
I wasn't shocked that these particular teenagers do that, if that makes sense.
Well, and they are very abruptly killed off
Yeah,
Very
but there's
gruesomely.
never a point in the film where anybody goes, "You shouldn't have done this, and you're bad." You know what I mean? Like
Right.
that's just not.
No, it
I think
doesn't
the
ju-
context.
doesn't pass judgment on them for it.
I think that the movie. This is just me believing from what I saw in this film. I think that it has zero awareness whatsoever about any contextual problem with blackface for Zwarte.
Yeah, I
Because you're
agree.
right. There's now all this Zwarte Piet where he looks like Dick Van Dyke. He's got smudgy, stuff on his face, and and they
Well,
don't do this anymore. But I think when the people made this, they just didn't give it a thought.
yeah, and that's why Drew started by saying by American standards, because honestly, I come from my family's from a country that is so like. I mean, when I saw the film The Help, I was like, this isn't the past in Latin America. This is now. Like Latin America just has such a different it's just so much more racially insensitive about like basically everything. So to me, I'm seeing this going, yeah, I totally get how for them this is not offensive because it's just not caught up to them as being like that because they don't have a vocal enough. They have such a small number of people of color, and they're probably not that vocal. I'm guessing. I'm not from there. I don't know, but I'm guessing that's the case. So you don't have that sense. Nobody's telling you this is offensive to us. Everybody's just the people who are offended are probably not heard. Honestly, that's my guess. But it's
Not
certainly
heard
the
is
case.
that would be
Yeah,
the
Well,
right.
it
yeah,
seems like the discussion, what I'm actually reading online, that as of 2013,
Yeah.
80% of the people in this country, the country, I'm
Netherlands.
blanking on the name now.
well, the
Netherlands,
Netherlands.
Netherlands. Yeah,
and didn't have a problem with this,
right.
and so it seems like just now they are starting to have like a conversation about this and go,
Sure.
maybe we shouldn't do this. Whereas like in America, this is a conversation we started having much
Right.
earlier, which isn't to say that America is perfect.
No.
Obviously we're not, but
Well, it's like I said, it's because I think we have many more people who are speaking up in this country because there's just larger numbers. That's part
Yeah.
of it anyway. Yeah.
I was thinking about this just today because this is not the only but one of two movies I watched today that had blackface in them. Because I also
what?
saw Wonder Bar, which is this really, really amazing
yeah.
film, but completely forgotten, where Al Jolson plays this Mephistopheles-like dude who controls all these people's lives at this enormous and complicated bar. So there's like military people and gangsters and people having affairs and murders and like all just kinds of stuff going on. And in the middle of it, he does numbers because he's a big performer. It's pre-code, so there's like gay jokes, there's everything. And then the whole thing stops for an enormous, huge blackface number that he does. And
Yeah.
the effect of it, what's weird there is you realize the reason why it's done is because the black person to these Al Jolson movies is the other. There's not even a moment of thinking like, what is the black audience going to think, or will people be embarrassed? It is never going to happen in the universe in which place it takes place. It will never happen. Nobody is ever going to watch it who will have any reason to do anything but other the people who are being imitated. It's
Well, and like I
fascinating.
said, that is the reality in many other countries. I mean, for sure, I can speak to some extent for Latin America. That yeah, that this treatment of people of color being a lesser class and servants being less than human that's just commonplace. And it's like, to us, we're like, wait, I thought we all knew. Now, of course, in today's culture that we're in right this second in America, we're finding out that what we all thought was we all agreed was horrible is actually to a lot of people not actually horrible, and they're feeling more empowered to do it. So maybe we're stepping backwards a little bit on that. But anyway, at least
Yeah.
So that's fascinating. So we've got the Zwarte Piet being the strangest thing to American eyes about all of this. I think as a horror movie, the thing that's shocking to American eyes is how free this movie is to slaughter children.
yeah, man.
Oh, well, that's his whole MO. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the night end of the night, when they're going through the nihilistic death toll,
Yes.
it's
Oh yeah,
He-
35 kids at that hospital.
yeah.
the hospital alone,
Mhm.
plus a busload, plus
Yeah.
man,
And I wonder because I mean the movie has the wherewithal to cut away so it doesn't bother to film that scene.
Thank
So it's
goodness.
not like we just watched Dr. Sleep, which shows us a really ugly child death,
Horrible.
and it's intended to make us afraid and uncomfortable and sad. This is not intended to make us uncomfortable and sad. This is essentially a campfire tale. He is, like so when anytime the movie's going to get too uncomfortable, it cuts away. There is
Yeah.
so yeah, he slaughters like 35 kids and
Well, I think what you're
Yeah.
talking about is the difference between I would call this story kind of ghoulish as opposed to outright disturbing, if
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
makes sense. Whereas like this thing you're talking about in Doctor Sleep, or even some of the stuff in like It Part 1, where
Yeah.
we see Georgie's death, like that's really disturbing. That's like a splash of cold ice water to the face.
Yeah.
Whereas like this, because it's got that sort of, okay, we're in the middle of a ghost story and you're going to come along with me, and it's got that kind of like scary stories to tell in the dark.
Yes.
It wants you to have fun. It's like inviting you along with it. Like
I think
if you're
that's
gonna
right.
play, you play this game with me. And you might get a little scared, but I promise you that you're gonna be okay on the other end.
Yeah.
That is the kind of horror movie that this is.
Oh, by the way, Drew, did you watch it subtitled or dubbed?
I've seen it subtitled a few times. This time, because I no longer have a Hulu account, I watched it dubbed, and the dubbed version is, as noted, super wonky. It's kind of
We
like
should take a
listening
moment to
to a
talk about this.
bad anime dub.
Yeah.
It's
Mm.
really
Well,
no worse than that. It reminded me of what's the German movie about the girl who has to keep running that like it just
Run
start was
Lola Run.
Yeah, Run Lola Run. If you've seen the dub of Run Lola Run, which I don't recommend, it's just as bad as this. It's really literally as though they
Well,
Julia,
yeah,
what were you suggesting?
I have a theory because my daughter is into certain YouTubers, and she was watching somebody named, I think it was Simone Gertz, I think is her name. Anyway, she was talking about this young woman who's talking about how she lived in was it Japan or China? I can't remember which. I think
It
China
was
maybe.
China
Yeah, she was living in China for like a year, just studying there in
as a
like high
teenager.
school as a teenager. And they said they had a sitcom, and they said they wanted the character to have an American girlfriend. So she was like the only American they could find, and she kind of spoke Chinese, and so they were like, you'll do. And she'd never acted a day in her life. She didn't know the Chinese lines. They kind of were like, what can you do? It was just so awkward, and she actually showed a clip of it and everything. But I'm thinking that's what happened here. I think they just went, we need some English speakers to dub this, and just like whoever's around. And I don't
Yes.
think they actually had actors available
There
to
is
pull
not a
from, so they just
single
pulled from
moment.
random people.
And I mean, in this 90-minute film, there is not a single line that is read that approximates the way a human talks in the slightest. It is literally the most. It is weird. It is like they were competing with one another to read lines as though they have
Badly.
never actually heard words before. I was mind boggled by it. I can't explain it in the slightest.
And it's
It,
distracting because you can tell the actors are decent, at least some of them. Like you're looking at them going, okay, this person's clearly emoting in some way,
right.
which is just not coming across
Wow,
at all.
I lucked out that I had Hulu then.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because
Yes, you did.
what's weird is if you go to Amazon, it has a listing for, you can buy the movie, and it has a listing for the not subtitled, the subtitled one,
Uh-huh.
but that says currently unavailable,
Huh.
and just shoves you to the English dub one.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to rent it, too bad. But when I did a search on Roku, it went straight to Hulu, and
Oh, that's
I lucked
fabulous.
out that was.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like to get into the kind of snobby version of this, but I do prefer, when possible, to watch the subtitle, listen to
with
the
good
original
reason.
actors.
I mean, I can go with both. It's fine. You can have you can have dubbing that's not bad. Like we watched like Godzilla 1985. Dub wasn't bad. Wasn't bad.
Sure.
You know, the actors were adequate. This is bizarre. This is truly like here. Read this line.
The voice of the guy playing the big bald cop
So weird.
cracks me
So
up.
weird.
It's like he's trying to sound like the Thing from the Fantastic Four.
He sounded to me as though he had been like computer like enhanced in some way. You know, his voice sounded like he was a kidnapper who was telling the police, you know, where to leave the money. It was just so bizarre because it was just like and it was no human talks the way that guy talks.
I might
was
have to
weird.
watch some excerpts then just to hear this insanity.
Yeah, you'll
I
be
think he was
amused.
the same actor as one of the other characters, and then
And they
they
just modulated the voice.
I think they modulated his voice down so that he would sound like a different person. But so that was
But you know,
really, truly
it
weird.
is Amsterdam, and so it's very possible that they just grabbed some tourists off the street and went, "Hey, can you read some lines for us?"
Everybody speaks English.
Yeah.
That's the crazy in the Netherlands. Look, nobody doesn't know English.
No, but I'm talking about
So-
Americans. I'm saying
Yeah.
that they were like, "We want somebody to read this. We want some Americans to read these lines. So let's
In an
just grab
American
some
accent.
tourists, some
True.
stone tourists."
Well, they do have the two tourists asking.
Yeah, that
have a
might be
question.
Oh, that
them.
was interesting,
That's
wasn't
what I'm
it?
saying. It might be those guys
Yeah.
that are reading the lines.
That was really funny. Yeah, a couple of tourists do show up. So plot wise, what's going on here? We have a young boy named Garrett who grows up to be a police officer who is convinced that the evil Santa Claus who murdered his family in '68 is going to come back, and he has been suspended from the police
Well, you
because he
should tell. I
believes
mean, we
that.
should talk about that scene because that scene is so horrific. Because he goes out to check on what the hell's going on with the animals, and while he's out there, his whole family is murdered horribly and horrifically. And then he comes in and finds it, so you know
Yeah.
he's super traumatized. So then, yeah, fast forward all these years, and he's the only one who really believes in this legend, and everybody else is like, "Oh, come on!" They're like messing with him, and
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, and then we have the teenagers. And one thing I thought was really cool, Tony, you brought this up. Teenagers are going to be obnoxious, and the adults think they're obnoxious, but sexuality is just a thing. They're having kind of a what I would call a secret Santa celebration in class.
But
where they
apparently
give
that
gifts.
is that's actually the thing according to
Secret
the
Santa.
stuff I read. Well, the whole
Okay.
business of giving a gift and having a little poem that makes fun of the
Yeah.
person.
Awesome. You know, and so you get a gift, and somebody in the class has written a poem to you. All that's sweet, and several of the gifts have been dildos because they are teenagers and they're horn dogs.
This
It's fine.
sort of
And
like
it's also Europe,
alternate,
so that's not like
Yeah.
a big deal.
Right.
Whereas
But
there's
there's
no
sort
way
of-
that's happening
Mhm.
here.
like the stuff with like the poems and everything though, and all that, like the weird secret Santa stuff. That is part of why I keep going back to this movie, because I like seeing the different version of Christmas.
Sure.
You know, like it's like all that stuff.
Yeah.
that, you know, it's familiar, but it's also exotic.
It's familiar to them. And so you kind of, because they are convinced that this is the way life is, you can just kind of roll along with it. Like, okay, I get it. This is just the way you guys are. You have the gifts and the poem and the whatever. It's cool. You know, yeah, I agree completely. And the girls teasing one another on the way home, you know, one who like supposedly doesn't believe in sex before marriage, and one who's cheating on her boyfriend with this other guy and is hoping that the boyfriend will break up with her. And it turns out that the virginal one is actually already sleeping with said boyfriend, and so on and so forth.
Well, it's very much like Halloween.
Yes, it is. Oh my gosh, you're right. This is like Halloween, the girls walking home.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that. That's a wonderful point.
And
Gosh.
that's why it's interesting in the way that it's not like our Silent Night, Deadly Night, or Black Christmas, or those movies where we have our own Santa Claus and there may be a chimney thing.
Yeah.
But what it's decided to be is a lot of influence from Western slasher movies.
Yeah.
With an original to US audiences anyway, kind of veneer.
Well, it's our movie tropes, but
Right.
their folklore.
With their
Exactly.
folklore.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. So yes, and they've gone home. Those are the girls. The boys are getting ready to go do their Sinterklaas thing at some sorority, and this is the night that evil Sinterklaas hits down and starts murdering people, and that all happens, over the course of the first 20 minutes or so.
Well, this is
of the
where it gets a little silly in my opinion, because they have a line where everybody's going to be dressed up, like 20 people are going to be dressed up as SINT, and then they arrest this kid because somebody dressed up like Sinterklaas has killed some people, and so they're like, oh, he must have done it because he's dressed. I'm like, didn't you just say like a few minutes ago that everybody in town is gonna be dressed like this tonight? So why this kid? You know?
But nobody else was dragging limbs.
No.
And
That's not. But that's not the point at which they arrest him. That's I'm talking about
I
when they
gotcha.
just arrest him and he's just out. Like, and he's like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, you're dressed as Sinterklaas, and apparently remember. And then
Is
he's in the
that
back
right?
of the.
No, but remember that's when he's got a. That's after he gets attacked and he's dragging a Black Pete arm behind his car.
No, but I'm talking about that. I'm talking about whenever he's in the cop car in the back.
Yeah.
That is not after that scene, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is after. That is
'Cause they're
after
transporting
his
his
so it's the
transporting
arm.
out of the-
Okay, so it's the arm that's the problem and not the costume. Okay,
Yeah,
I thought
yeah,
it was the costume was.
I mean,
It's
well,
the
it's the
costume,
costume
too.
plus
yeah,
like
Plus
that's the arm.
blood and all.
of
the
all of
friends.
the Sinterklaas and all the towns and all the
Yeah,
countries,
yeah.
you're the Sinterklaas who has an arm dragging behind the car.
On account of
Yeah.
having been attacked by a bunch of Pete's. Yeah,
Oh,
right. Okay.
But also, let us not forget the boat that he comes in on. Rex just destroys a cop boat.
Oh yeah, that's amazing. That was a cool scene.
It starts.
It was a very. That's what I'm saying when I say there's some really clever things, because it is very suspenseful that that the Coast Guard is out on the water, the police boat is out on the water, and they're like, it's super foggy, and they think there's not going to be anybody, but then they see a blip on their radar, and then suddenly the blip's coming at them like a torpedo, and they go outside, and this big black pearl ship just mows them down. And then they're like, yeah.
It's almost like how they do it in like a Godzilla movie. We're like, what's under the water?
Yeah.
Or a submarine movie, but yeah, just Rex things.
I thought that was really clever.
Yeah.
I thought that some of the gory murders were really clever. Like, who was it that was talking and he's like going, oh, there's nothing, blah blah blah, and then suddenly a blade comes up through his mouth, like out, as if he's sticking out his tongue, except that it's a blade that's coming out through the back of his head, out his mouth.
Stunned that these words are coming out of your mouth.
No, I just thought it was funny and clever.
Who are you? It's like
all of these episodes.
You guys have ruined me apparently with this. All these movies now. Anyway, I just thought that was funny. Now the ones where people are getting slashed like in half, like their heads are being slashed, that I was not there for. I was like, I'm closing my eyes. I don't want to see any of this. But that particular one just made me laugh because it was so weird and unexpected.
Yes, no, that's true. And in fact, this is episode 283 that we're doing right now. I don't even know what number of Christmas episodes it is.
So you're saying that's how long it's taken for you guys to ruin me?
This is our 283rd movie review. And so it's possible that by that time you're just desensitized to,
for sure.
You're always talking about redoing old episodes. We should go back and do Return of the Living Dead and see if she finds it more tolerable, because that's the episode she actually walked out on.
It's a really solid point.
That would be an interesting social experiment.
Yeah, you're right. And it's what we call a natural experiment, because we did not plan it. Yeah. No, excellent point. So, all right. Yes, Klaus come to town. So, two things going on. This kid's in the inn, has been arrested, but is soon to be let free. And meanwhile, Garrett, the chief of police, has grabbed their, I don't know, international mystery dude,
badge
and said, "Go find Garrett."
Well, I want to back up and say they've taken this guy's badge and his gun because he shot a Christmas present.
on his
Like-
desk in the
Yes,
station.
Yeah, right.
That's one of the, like, whether intentional or not, to me, one of the funniest scenes in this whole movie.
it is very funny.
Yeah, he comes into the station. He sees a beautifully wrapped gift on his desk, and he immediately shoots the hell out of it. And it's like all this liquor pours out, and they're like, "You just shot up 4 bottles of wine."
Yes. So they're like, go home, take the month off, you know, and yeah, like he's Last Action Hero or something. And so he goes home. So then later, once the actual Great White starts eating people, the chief of police goes, go get Brody and bring him back. And so the fixer guy, whose role in the Dutch police is never made clear to me, just goes out to bring our guy back, to bring Garrett back. And where we finally wind up is Garrett and the kid start chasing after Klaus together. And we should really only just point out a couple of the sequences that are really cool. There's the rooftop. There's the rooftop sequence where Sinterklaas is running across rooftops and actually, as we
On
mentioned,
his horse. Yeah.
he attacks a hospital full of people.
Right, but he's always on the horse. That's the
Yes.
key.
Yes, and he only sometimes has the army of helpers. They're not all the time. If you could do this
The
movie,
rules are pretty inconsistent, if we're being honest.
Okay.
You know, like,
Yes, I agree.
'cause, like, if you have an army of undead helpers, why would you? I mean, I understand, like, he's obviously sadistic and evil, and he wants to murder some people himself. But, like, why doesn't he always go out with his our entourage of Pete's? Like, that
Yes.
They
doesn't
can't keep up
seem
because they
to
don't have horses.
That's
Oh,
possible.
there you go.
Well, to me, it looked like it was more like he comes in, they're around when they need to be, but in general, he just goes, "Hey, make more chaos."
Yeah, go make mayhem. Yeah,
Indiscriminate mayhem on the part of his helpers.
yeah,
Because he is not as present when they first get attacked in the car.
that's true.
Like, it's more
Then
of
it's the
just
helpers,
Pete's. Yeah. So they get to just wander around creating havoc while he goes and murders children.
Did you get a massive like Halloween 2 vibe when he's stalking the hospital? You know,
Oh, sure.
he kills the one nurse by dragging her up into the ceiling or something. But I loved all of this. And by the way, there's nobody in this hospital. I have been to
There
hospitals.
never is. I am so puzzled in these horror movies how these hospitals are always so underpopulated.
Understaffed. Yeah, I mean, honestly, swear to God, even in a hospital that's suffering, if you typically go on any night, including New Year's Eve, there will be lots of people there. I've never seen a long
Can I
dark
say
hallway.
something as somebody
Yes.
who has recently been in a hospital?
Yeah, sure.
I always feel like when you see this in horror films, they're going off of how it feels to be in a hospital versus
Oh.
how it actually is, because there is something very kind of creepy and lonely about hospitals to me.
All right, I'll buy that. I will. I'll buy that. That you feel like there's nobody around, even if there's actually a giant crew of people.
The
working.
thing
Sure.
is, though, I had an experience recently where I needed to use a restroom. We were in the mountains, and I was like, I need to use a restroom. And so we found like a city building, and I went, I'm gonna go in here and see if I can use the restroom. And I walked in, and there was nobody at the front desk, and nobody in any of the offices. I guess it was lunchtime, basically. And so I just walked through and just found a restroom and went to it and left, and I never saw a human person. And I went, this is like literally, I think, the first time I've been in a building that was like this, like it is in the horror movies where there's nobody, because that just doesn't happen in a hospital. You can't walk through a hospital without encountering either humans or at the very least locked doors that you can't get in. Maybe there's not a human at the reception, but then you can't get past that point, So anyway, that was the first time I was like, oh,
it's funny that experience that you had. You're like, in the movies, either you could be a killer who goes in while the place is deserted and then just waits, or you're certainly vulnerable there going in when it's completely deserted, because apparently everybody went to the super salad or something. And that's just wild. I remember that, by the way. There's a tiny little municipal building somewhere in some mountain town. Yes. So we wind up, I don't even remember how we wound up here, because this is not a very long movie. But basically, the kid and I should call him Frank. but the teenage boy Frank and Garrett wind up working together in a very, very like action movie
Well,
plan.
it happens after the rooftop rampage. He rescues him with a flamethrower, and he's all like,
right, because he's got a
fire
flamethrower.
is the because fire is one of the only things that can hurt him.
Yeah, because the
Yeah.
kid, Frank is about to get killed by Santa Claus, and
Garrett
then
shows up with the
and then
flamethrower.
Garrett shows
That's
up
right.
with the flamethrower.
And then he
right.
says, "Stick with me. I've got a plan. I'm gonna take my powerboat and I'm gonna blow up what we'll call the Black Pearl with with big barrels of explosives." And yes, and that
Which
plan
worked so well the first time that I'm sure
right.
it'll be perfect.
But that plan basically works. Although Garrett is
Well, I have a question about
mortally
this.
wounded. Yeah.
I have a question about this. So, when they are, because at one point they get picked up, they're in their little boat, and they get picked up by, I guess, the equivalent of the Coast Guard, who then take them to investigate Saint Nick's boat.
Right.
And you hear kids whimpering on the boat. Then you have all the final battle stuff, and the kid manages to send the explosives into the schooner and blow it up.
Yes.
So did our hero blow up a bunch of kids who are still alive?
I think that they're just ghosts.
Are those ghost kids? Because they never say one way or the other. And
I'm sure that they're not alive, because they say at the end that in the hospital there were 35 children who died.
They're definitely not alive after they got blown up. But
but in the like that people died at the hospital. So I don't get the impression that anybody ever is suggesting that children were kidnapped and taken away. So I think that's
kids
just ghosts
whimpering on the boat. So,
yeah, I agree.
that is weird.
I didn't hear it all that clearly, but I don't know. There's no explanation. It's possible.
I'm going to go with ghost kids because the
kidnapped
alternative is too disturbing.
I mean, black people are supposed to be stealing bad kids, so
Yeah, but I'm saying the idea that he just blew them all up is really terrible.
No, I agree.
It makes him the worst hero ever.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. He's definitely up there.
Well, he's up there with the X-Men, with the Avengers. I mean.
What was your thought about the Avengers? I can't.
No, just when they all, like, everybody hates them because they when they're fighting
they
the
blew up
bad
a
guys,
building.
they end up blowing up entire towns.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yep. Yes. So that's that. I mean, I know that we could go deeper, but that definitely brings us to the end. Isn't there a sequel to this movie? Isn't there a Saint 2?
Not that I know of.
Okay. I could be wrong about this.
That would, if that's the case, I need to find that like immediately, so I can watch that and get that into my brain.
I could have sworn that I saw a reference to a Saint 2, but it doesn't mean
it is not. It is not showing up on Google, but that doesn't mean that it does not exist.
We'll
there's certainly like a bazillion cheapy Christmas horror movies and it could be that somebody tried to pass it off as a sequel to that.
Oh, sure.
I can see that being incredible, because this movie got a weird amount of buzz for a brief period of time. Like, as it came out, I remember around the same time people started talking more about rare exports.
Yeah.
Like people because rare exports at least got kind of an art house distribution in America, whereas like this, like it kind of got dumped onto the Netflix before Netflix was the behemoth that it is now. But I remember people, that's how I heard about it. It's like, oh, have you seen this Dutch killer Santa movie? If you like rare exports, you might like this. Although this movie and that are kind of, even though they're both, quote unquote Christmas horror movies, they are kind of apples and oranges to a degree. But
your point about it being, you could have a movie that calls itself Saint 2 is well taken, because as Tony and I know from a billion, like, and as you know, like, so many movies are called things like Dawn of the Dead 2 and Zombie 2.
Zombie was marketed in Europe as a sequel to Dawn of the Dead.
Right.
And that's a pretty good movie. But I would be interested if anybody who listens to the show says, "Oh yeah, there's like a legit sequel to this." I would actually like to know, because then I want to track that down. And
by the way,
watch.
think of the ostentatiousness of presenting Zombie as Dawn of the Dead 2. That is the most ridiculous. When you consider that those two, like, you could not have a more different film.
Well,
It's like
they do both have zombies in them.
they do, but like one is
Like a more different film is like Dawn of the Dead and Gone with the Wind.
right. True.
So you're taking issue with like basically the equivalent of literally.
It'd be well, I mean, it's
Yeah, I
almost
gotcha.
as though, remember how Better Off Dead had like skiing in it, and how Hot Dogs had skiing in it. It'd be like if you presented Better Off Dead as Hot Dogs 2, because they
Yeah.
both had skiing, which
I
maybe
get it.
we could have done. Anyway,
We could do
all
this
right.
for a few hours.
There's also, I don't know if they made it, but when I saw Rare Exports, there was also a short that they were hoping to turn into a feature-length film about the Yule Lads,
Huh.
which are like these 13 trolls, and there's like Hook Hand and Window
Spoon
Licker
Licker.
and all these
Sausage Stealer.
Yeah, but they're in the short, Sausage Stealer had his hook that he steals sausages. Of course, he hooks the people stuck in this cabin, and so I don't know if that ever got turned. I need to look it up again
I
because
would love to see a movie about the Yule Lads.
I'll see if I can find the short anywhere.
I heard about the short. I've never seen it, but
it's crazy town. It was really good. But yeah, and I talked to the filmmakers,
if the evil sausage stealer isn't doing at least a couple castrations, somebody is not thinking this through. I mean, seriously, just think about that. That's like I cannot believe that they would.
Let's not.
I can't believe they would leave that on the table, so to speak. It's a big loss. Okay.
Wow, I feel like you're about to get into some seriously dangerous pun territory here.
Well, I actually had a really terrible nightmare last December about Spoon Licker, because I had to give a talk, which I will talk more about actually when we get to our endorsements. But I was giving a talk at a local bookstore about Christmas folklore, including the Yule Lads.
That's cool.
Yeah, and but I had also, that was kind of the start of the medical problems that continued into 2019, and so I was not feeling very good, and part of that was I had not been sleeping, and it was causing me to have really crazy dreams. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night hearing tap 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 tap, and I kind of woke up, and in that sort of like half stage between asleep and awake, I saw this like large, horrible, gnomish man raking a wooden spoon across these horrible teeth on the edge of our bed. And I was like, oh, and I jumped up out of the bed, and I completely terrified
said,
Jamie.
"Go
it was
sit
you.
by Drew.
You are Spoon Licker. Okay. Wow. You're the culprit. I didn't realize.
That's where you were for those couple of days, Jason? In Austin?
That's terrifying.
I did not realize
that
your
happened.
mom is an Icelandic giantess.
Well, she's definitely Northern European of something.
Oh my goodness! Wow, that's really disturbing, my friend. All right. Let's get our final thoughts on this truly unusual film, Sinterklaas. So, Britta, where did we start? It was Julia, right? So,
yeah.
Julia,
well, and I said in my opening thoughts that one of the things I liked was the transitions. I didn't really talk about that yet. I thought they had some really neat ideas. Like, and one in particular that comes to mind is that you have this outdoor scene, and then you pan up. Like what's the expression? What's the where it's like a wipe, I guess it is, or whatever. But anyway, you pan up, and now you're like, you've basically come up from under the bed of this girl. Now you're in her bedroom. And it was just such a neat, like, there was just things like that where I was like, okay, that is really clever. I feel like they really they weren't calling it in, they really put some effort into having some really good looking scenes, the really atmospheric scenes. The gore for sure, they worked really hard on. Like I said, I did think it was really funny at times. I kept saying, what was it? I'm halved. What is it that he says it in?
It was I'm cut in half real bad, Dewey.
Yeah,
That
but
was
it's like I'm halved real bad, or something like that.
no,
Anyway,
it was I'm cut in half real bad. I remember
yeah,
that very,
walk
very
the
distinctly. Yes.
what is it? Walk hard or something? I don't know.
Walk hard.
But
Yes.
anyway,
Walk
yeah.
hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that, and I thought about that a lot, and I thought about It's Only a Flesh Wound, from Monty Python. It's just there's just stuff like that where I felt like the gore was just so comical and silly, but but they clearly put a great deal of work into it. I mean, it was not half-assed. So I thought that the effect of Sinterklaas was not good. I didn't like that they showed his face way too much. I think it would have been much better if he'd been more of a just a dark shadowy kind of figure and not necessarily look at his face, because it's not a good effect. But the horse, like I say, I like the horse. I thought there was a lot of really interesting bits. And I like the character of the police officer, the guy who's just been like tormented his whole life by having lost his family. He was very interesting. I was sad that he doesn't survive to the end of the film.
Yeah.
But I guess they has to pass the torch to the next survivor to be there in 20 years or however many, whatever it is. How
That's
many
right.
years you said it's going to be the next one? It's like 18 or something.
So it was
Anyway,
like 23, if I remember.
No, but that was the
correctly.
last one. But then the next one, he
It's
goes,
every
"We'll
time
see
it's
in
on a
18."
full moon.
Yeah. But he
Yeah.
actually says, the kid actually says, when the next one will be, I think he says 18 years for the next one. So if they do a sequel, it'll be that guy, taking up the torch.
That's true. All right, Mr. Tony, what were your final thoughts?
I
Was it
I
Drew?
was
I apologize. It's
listening.
Drew. So I'll cut this stammering. Drew, final thoughts.
I feel like we didn't talk enough about the weird conspiratorial elements, like how the hero is basically bribed at the end of the movie to keep his
Right.
mouth shut because he's got a sick mom.
Mhm.
And they're like, okay, keep your mouth shut. Like, so there's also this like conspiratorial thing to it. And I could talk for hours about the awesomeness of the rooftop horseback rampage, because I just think that's one of the coolest things I've seen in a horror movie this last decade. But I really like this movie. I guess I was kind of apologizing for it before we started recording, because I don't know why, because I don't normally do, but like it's become kind of a yearly thing with me, and I think in part because it is very atmospheric. It's got this snowy creepiness with it, especially with like the old world architecture of Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And I wish there were more horror movies that played into the very actually long history of monsters and ghosts attached to Christmas. And I feel like that this is a genre that's only kind of started to come into its own in recent history, because you had Rare Exports and then this movie and Krampus, and I want to see more of this and less guys in mall Santa outfits going on rampages, because this is like, I really like this genre, or subgenre, or whatever you want to call it, because it's just so much fun. And again, once you kind of take that dive into like the rabbit hole of like Christmas folklore, there's so much cool stuff that would be great fodder for movies. So I like the fact that this is kind of another addition into like the pantheon of that. And it's just a fun, audacious, weird movie in its own right. You are right, even though you don't like the Evil Dead movies, you are right to kind of draw that comparison. It's got that sort of like free-for-all craziness that the Evil Dead movies have. And I actually like the makeup for Saint Nicholas. I think he's cool looking. He's got kind of a Yuletide crypt keeper. I dig it. So I'm glad that we ended up closing out our year on this one, because I think this was a fun movie to discuss, and actually pretty close to the actual Saint Nicholas Eve.
Absolutely.
For what it's
That's
worth.
absolutely right. Fantastic. Tony, what are your thoughts?
I like I said, I dug it. I like its steadfastness to 80s sensibilities. I don't know if I'd revisit it as much as Drew, but I did dig it. I didn't think I was going to like it as much at first as I end up liking by the end. I think the makeup effects, especially the practical effects, are really good. And the gore it's over the top, but it's got, again, all the hallmarks of that heyday of 80s slashers. The part also where he takes a staff and turns it into this almost, Hong Kong wuxia kind of thing.
Yeah, it was
He's
like
decapitating
the
people.
flying guillotine, right?
Yeah,
It
it's
was a
got all
lot like
this
that.
bits. It's got a lot of great, interesting parts, and they really hit on it at the end with, I agree with Drew, the conspiracy of, look, Catholic Church wants to cover this up. Nobody really wants to hear that this is Saint Nick because it's terrifying.
Yeah.
So let's protect the world by not letting them know there's a Christmas lich that comes in.
Yes.
And just wreaks havoc, along with his really inappropriate helpers.
Yeah.
All that stuff is really good. It's not a movie for everyone. I think if you like the movies we discussed that it cribs from, if you're not a purist in that form, and that's okay too, again, like what you like. If you're looking for something that takes those sensibilities, reaches back further than the 90s, then I think you might enjoy this. And it is, like Drew said, we tend to get a lot of, I love Rare Exports and, Troll Hunter and all these things where you see from another perspective. I'm really going to search for that Yule Lads short. I don't know if it's out and about on like YouTube or Vimeo, but if it is, I'll post it on the site because it was truly terrifying short. And if it got turned into a film, I'll post that too. But yeah, we don't, finding something new and interesting in the horror genre, holiday horror genre, is sometimes a little harder.
Yeah.
So I think this does that. Definitely not for everyone, but definitely worth finding, especially if you have Hulu, because then you can watch it subtitled if that's your poison.
Definitely better subtitled than dubbed. The dub is weird, but if that is the only way you can watch it, I still think it's worth watching.
I agree. Totally worth watching, even bearing in mind that the dub sounded nutso. Truly. Absolutely. That's wonderful. Okay. I would like to get people's endorsements. Whatever you've been reading or watching that you'd like to bring some attention to. I'm dying to know. So let's we started with Julia. Julia, do you have anything for us?
Sure. Well, I've endorsed Marvelous Mrs. Maisel in the past, and it's back with a new season, which is awesome. It's on it's Netflix, Jason, or is it
It's on
Amazon Prime? It's
Amazon
Amazon Prime. Yeah, Amazon
Yeah.
Prime. And then also, I believe on Prime, I forget which thing is what's on what. Is it Prime or is it Netflix that has The Laundromat, the movie? Is that a Netflix movie? I'm sorry. I apologize. But the Laundromat is the movie I was telling you about.
Oh, that's on Netflix.
That's on Netflix. Okay.
Yes.
That was, so it's a Marvelous Miss Maisel, just fantastic as always. The Laundromat, really odd movie, that a Netflix original film with Meryl Streep, and just a really huge cast. It's like Gary Oldman, Antonio Banderas, James Cromwell, just a bunch of people. Really strange and interesting picture about the Laundromat is basically a center for laundering money, a place that that creates companies so that they can launder money. But it's really just neat and bizarre and creative. So I think that's a good thing to check out if you have Netflix, which most of us do.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Drew, what about you?
Well, I have. I'm going to go out of 2019 on a self-serving note twice over. First off, this Wednesday, December 11th, those of you who are in the area, I will be at Hops and Heroes from 5 o'clock to 10 p.m. It's going to be a combination book signing. I am also doing a talk I did the same talk last year on Christmas folklore, ghosts, and monsters. And also, you are encouraged to bring your own ghost story, real or imagined, to share with everyone. And then after the signing and everything is over, we are going to be showing the film Krampus in the store. So a
Wow.
lot of the sort of things that we're talking about in this podcast right now, we will be talking about all over again. So if you like this whole creepy Christmas vibe, you can keep it going at Hops and Heroes on December 11th. I also want to say something to our listeners. I'm trying to give people a chance to give the gift of independent comics this Christmas season. So if you want to, if you have a comic book lover in your family or friend group that you think would enjoy Halloween Man, if you come to the signing and you give me the passcode Sinterklaas, you get half off of your purchase. So that is a cool thing for Castle of Horror listeners that I am offering up. So I want to see if I want to see how many people actually listen in Austin. This is an experiment. So look up Hops and Heroes on Cesar Chavez. Now, those of you who cannot make it to a signing in Austin, Texas, because I know we have a lot of national and international listeners, fear not. Because Halloween Man and Lucy Chaplin Science Starlet are both part of Comixology's end of year sale, which is going from now until the end of 2019, baby. So you can get massive savings on a lot of Halloween Man and Lucy Chaplin back issues digitally on Comixology right now. Just search Halloween Man, it'll take you right to that, and fill up your digital comics, feed your digital comics addiction, because it's never too late to start a bad habit. I know you're about to start all the good habits with New Year's resolutions, but I think you just need to start a bad one, like reading comics. So here's a way to do it cheaply. And
Wow.
On that note, I'm done. That's my last endorsement of 2019.
Of 2019? Well, that's wonderful. That's really great. Tony, what do you have for us?
So I have a few things. Be on the lookout. I'm sure I'll post it. We're a little under 2 weeks away from the new Deserts of Mars EP, which has been the big thing this year for me. Last year was Rise from Fire. This is really this kind of comeback thing is huge for me. So be watching for that. Also, Shout Factory TV this month is all about these weird B-movie sci-fi movies. Eyes Behind the Stars, First Man into Space, Frankenstein Meets the Space Monster. There's one that's alternatively called Planets Around Us or Planets Against Us. All kinds of The War Between Planets, all this weird like schlocky sci-fi stuff that's fantastic. Kudos to Shout Factory yet again for bringing another month of stuff that I'm trying to work my way through in addition to all the other movies I want to watch. And I also found randomly a new Roku channel called Legendary TVs and Movies. And it had I need to find the name of this one movie that took me there. Now I can't remember. About a now I can't find it. Anyway, I'll have to find it. But it's like a sword and sandals movie, probably from Italy, that has a death ray from Atlantis. It's pretty insane. So
that sounds really cool.
If I remember it while you're talking, I may put a plug in. But Legendary TVs and Movies has a bunch of, again, public domain weird crazy stuff, which I really enjoy.
I really would like to do a public domain OTT channel just to put lots of thoughts around these public domain stuff. You know what I mean? Where the experience would be the discussions, that would be, because obviously you can see public domain stuff anywhere. But like if you had all these, like, I don't know, pop-up video style maybe, or who knows, or you could do it Elvira style, where occasionally
like commentary, or you could do like a commentary track, like kind of like the MST guys, basically.
Well, like Elvira, her jokes were lame, but truly, she would stop occasionally and go, "Whoa, what did we just see?" And she'd like back up and do a,
but if you do a riff track style or MST style, then you can just
totally valid point. Yeah. So yeah.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Sorry. The Giant of Metropolis.
1961. Very good.
About the guy who travels to the sinful capital of Atlantis to rebuke its godlessness and hubris.
Oh, that sounds fabulous.
And it's everything that's in the Hercules sword and sandal movies, but with crazier Atlantean costumes as well.
That sounds perfect, and that's actually directed by Umberto Scarpelli. So awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you for the tip. I will, and you've also inspired me. If we can figure out how to add another 3 months into any given year, we'll just start a public domain OTT channel and go hog wild.
Sure.
Man, that would be awesome. All right. Well, you heard it here first, folks. Okay. All right. My own endorsement. I've only one thing. I've read a couple of books this week. I watched a lot of stuff. I watched Wonder Bar today, and that's wonderful, but I'll save that for another time. I watched Living with Yourself, the whole damn series, and it is really good. Julia refuses to watch it because she says it sounds too disturbing. But
Well, yeah, because it's like Paul Rudd living with him, a copy of himself, or vice versa, depending on which Paul Rudd you're talking about. And I just thought that was just too weird. I don't know. I'm not really into the idea because there's a wife involved in the
well, right. He instead of Calvin, who deliberately makes a copy of himself, Paul thinks that he's signing up to become a better version of himself, and what he doesn't realize is that the spa that does this thing that he signed up for, what they actually do is murder you and replace you with a better version of yourself, a clone that has all your memories, so you won't know that you've been
They
replaced.
screw up the murder this
But
time.
they screw up, and so he lives, and so there's two of them. And it's just about what do you do if there's suddenly two of you. Fascinating, really, really good. And I found it's extremely watchable, and so that's wow. And so what among the stuff that Julia and I endorsed was like it was like an Amazon Prime series, a Netflix series, and a Netflix movie. So I don't know.
Oh yeah. Also, in the Christmas theme, Anna and the Apocalypse is out on streaming. If you want to watch a Christmas zombie musical,
love it.
There you go. So if you thought what would happen if High School Musical had zombies, Anna and the Apocalypse has you, and it's again a Fantastic Fest movie that everybody really dug at Fantastic Fest a couple of years ago. It's been out for a while, but it kind of periodically comes and goes, and I just saw that it's on streaming as well. So if that sounds like a thing that you dig, definitely that's another thing to watch.
I got one more, and I'm almost I don't know. I hate to double dip, but I got one more that I want to mention, and that is that I've discovered that Silk Stockings is free on Vudu, and oh my God, this Silk Stockings, if you don't remember it, was a nighttime basic cable cop show starring Rob Estes, and the whole idea was sexy Miami Vice. It was like, what if you had Miami Vice and it took place in like Fort Lauderdale and everything's sexy? That's basically it. Ben Vereen plays their cop boss lieutenant. The show is sometimes so cheap that the offices they're in appear to be floating in black space. They're like just on a soundstage, but all the lights are turned off elsewhere, so there's just like the whiteboard and the desks and the stuff, but there's no it is so strange and trashy and wonderful. So yes, I'm always like, watch Route 66, best television show ever made. This is not that. This is like literally one of the worst, and it's fabulous. So that's Silk Stockings from me to you. That's what you want. All right, thank you. Listen, come and talk to us on the Facebook page. We want to hear from all of our listeners. We want to know. We've certainly got more Stephen King to get to in the new year. There's all these things that we want to get to. We've thrown around lots of ideas like the single white female series or the stepfather or just all kinds of stuff. We want to hear your ideas. Let us know what should go on our wish list. Be excellent to each other, and we cannot wait to kick off the new year with some more movies. So everyone have a fantastic week, and thank you for being on. Bye, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah,
Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays, all of the
Happy
holidays.
New Year. Happy holidays. Happy Hanukkah. Beware of Sinterklaas. All that good stuff.
Be good for goodness sake.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All right. Adios, everyone.
Night.
Night.
All right. Bye.